The warm June sun filtered through the curtains of Alex Thompson's bedroom, casting a gentle glow on his face as he stirred from sleep. At 17, he was on the cusp of adulthood, his mind filled with dreams of college and the future that lay ahead. Little did he know that this ordinary summer morning would be the last time he'd wake up in this room, the room that had been his sanctuary for as long as he could remember. Alex stretched and reached for his phone, scrolling through his notifications with bleary eyes. A text from his best friend, a few likes on his latest Instagram post, and his heart skipped a beat. 20 missed calls from his parents. A cold dread settled in his stomach as he noticed several furious messages from his younger sister, Megan. What the hell? He muttered, sitting up abruptly. Before he could make sense of it all, his bedroom door flew open with a bang. Alexander James Thompson! His father's voice boomed, face contorted with rage. Get up and explain yourself right now. Confused and still groggy, Alex stumbled out of bed. Dad, what's going on? His mother appeared behind his father, her usually kind face twisted with disappointment and anger. How could you, Alex? We raised you better than this. Better than what? Alex's mind raced, trying to piece together what could have possibly happened to cause such an outburst. His sister Megan pushed past their parents, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Don't pretend you don't know. Everyone at school is talking about it. How could you do this to me? Alex's confusion turned to panic. Megan, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please, just tell me what's going on. His father stepped forward, looming over Alex. We got calls from 3 different parents this morning. They told us about the disgusting rumors you've been spreading about your sister. How you've been telling everyone at school that she's been sleeping around, doing drugs, that she got caught shoplifting. The accusations hit Alex like a physical blow. What? No, I would never say anything like that about Megan. That's insane. Don't lie to us, his mother shrieked, her voice cracking. Megan's reputation is ruined. Do you have any idea what you've done? Alex's mind whirled. He looked at Megan, who was sobbing into her hands. Megan, you know I would never do that to you. Someone must be lying, trying to cause trouble between us. But Megan just shook her head, refusing to meet his eyes. I trusted you, Alex. You were supposed to be my big brother, to protect me, not destroy me. I didn't do this, Alex pleaded, looking from one family member to another. Please, you have to believe me. We can figure this out together. There has to be some explanation. His father's face hardened. The explanation is that you're a liar and a bully. We've given you everything, Alex. And this is how you repay us? By tearing down your own sister? No, Dad, I swear. Enough. His father's shout made them all flinch. I won't have a son who would do something so cruel and cowardly. Pack your things. You're leaving. The words didn't register at first. Alex stared at his father, uncomprehending. Leaving? What do you mean? His mother's voice was cold. You heard your father. You're no longer welcome in this house. Not after what you've done. You can't be serious, Alex whispered, his world crumbling around him. Where am I supposed to go? That's not our problem anymore, his father replied. You're 17, old enough to face the consequences of your actions. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out. Mom, Dad, please, Alex begged, tears welling in his eyes. This is all a mistake. I would never hurt Megan like that. You know me. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. His parents turned away, ushering a still sobbing Megan out of the room. The door slammed shut, leaving Alex alone in suffocating silence. For a moment, he stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Then, as the reality of his situation sank in, he fell to his knees, body racked with sobs. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? Who would spread such vicious lies, and why had his family so readily believed them? As the minutes ticked by, Alex's shock gave way to a numb acceptance. With shaking hands, he began to pack, stuffing clothes and a few precious belongings into his school backpack and a duffel bag. Each item he touched brought a fresh wave of pain, photographs of happier times, gifts from the very people who were now casting him out. An hour later, Alex stood on the front porch of the only home he'd ever known, his meager possessions at his feet. His parents watched from the doorway, their faces masks of disappointment and resolve. Megan was nowhere to be seen. I hope someday you'll realize what you've done and make amends, his mother said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. Until then, don't come back. The door closed with a final devastating click. Alex stared at it for a long moment, willing it to open, for his family to rush out and tell him it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. But the door remained shut, and the silence of the suburban street pressed in around him. With a heavy heart and nowhere else to go, Alex shouldered his bags and began to walk. He had no destination in mind, no plan beyond putting one foot in front of the other. As he reached the end of his street, he turned back for one last look at the house that had been his whole world. I'll figure this out, he whispered to himself, a promise and a prayer. I'll clear my name and make things right. Somehow. With that, Alex Thompson turned away from his past and stepped into an uncertain future, alone but determined to survive whatever challenges lay ahead. 5 years had passed since that fateful summer morning when Alex Thompson's life had been turned upside down. Now, at 22, he barely resembled the wide-eyed teenager who had been cast out of his childhood home. Life on the streets had hardened him, chiseling away his youthful softness and replacing it with a lean, weathered exterior that matched the toughness he'd cultivated within. The first few months after his expulsion had been a blur of fear, hunger, and desperate scrambling for survival. He'd slept in parks, under bridges, and in homeless shelters when he could find a bed. The bitter irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. He'd gone from a comfortable suburban life to fighting for scraps in a matter of days, all because of a lie he still couldn't understand. But Alex was nothing if not resilient. He'd always been a good student, and now he applied that same dedication to learning the harsh lessons of street life. He learned which dumpsters behind which restaurants yielded the best leftover food. He figured out how to wash up in public restrooms and how to make a cardboard box feel like a fortress. Most importantly, he learned to trust his instincts and to never, ever let his guard down. It was during his second winter on the streets that Alex's luck began to change. While huddled in the doorway of a closed bookstore, trying to stay warm, he struck up a conversation with the owner, who was closing up for the night. The man, a kindly older gentleman named Frank, took pity on Alex and offered him a job sweeping floors and organizing shelves. That job became Alex's lifeline. With a steady, if meager, income, he was able to rent a tiny room in a rundown boarding house. It wasn't much, but it was a roof over his head and a door he could lock, luxuries he'd learned never to take for granted. Frank became more than just an employer. He became a mentor and the closest thing to family Alex had known since his exile. Recognizing Alex's intelligence and drive, Frank encouraged him to pursue his education. With Frank's guidance, Alex enrolled in online classes, studying in the quiet hours of the bookstore and burning the midnight oil in his tiny room. Now, 5 years after being thrown out, Alex stood on the precipice of a new life. He'd completed his bachelor's degree in computer science, working tirelessly to balance his studies with his job at the bookstore. His natural aptitude for programming, combined with the grit he'd developed on the streets, had caught the attention of a small but growing tech startup. As Alex walked into the sleek office building for his first day as a junior software developer, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The pain of his family's betrayal had never fully healed, but he'd channeled that hurt into an unyielding determination to succeed. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson." The receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome to Nexus Innovations. Are you ready for your first day?" Alex took a deep breath, straightening his secondhand suit jacket. "More than ready," he replied with a confidence that surprised even him. As he was led through the office to his new workspace, Alex felt a surge of pride. He'd done it. Against all odds, he'd not only survived, but thrived. The scared teenager who'd been thrown out with nothing had become a man with a future, a man who had built something from nothing. Settling into his desk, Alex powered up his computer and looked at the empty screen. It was a blank canvas, full of possibility, much like his life now. He flexed his fingers, ready to start coding, ready to start the next chapter of his life. But even as he immersed himself in his work, a small part of Alex couldn't help but wonder about the family he'd left behind. Did they ever think of him? Did they regret their decision? Had they ever learned the truth about the lies that had torn them apart? Alex pushed those thoughts aside. He had a new life now, one he'd fought hard to create. Whatever the future held, he was ready to face it head on, just as he had every challenge for the past 5 years. As the day progressed, Alex threw himself into his work, impressing his new colleagues with his quick thinking and innovative solutions. By the time he left the office that evening, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. Walking back to his small apartment, Alex allowed himself a moment of reflection. He'd come so far, but this was just the beginning. With determination in his stride, he looked ahead to the bright future he was building for himself, one line of code at a time. 3 years flew by in a whirlwind of code, caffeine, and career advancement. At 25, Alex Thompson had become the rising star of Nexus Innovations. His innovative approach to problem solving and tireless work ethic had caught the attention of the company's leadership, leading to rapid promotions and increasing responsibilities. Now, as the newly appointed head of software development, Alex sat in his corner office, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. The view still took his breath away, a constant reminder of how far he'd come from those dark days on the streets. A knock on his door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," Alex called, swiveling his chair to face the entrance. Sarah, his assistant, poked her head in. "Mr. Thompson, the board is ready for your presentation." Alex nodded, gathering his tablet and notes. "Thanks, Sarah. I'll be right there." As he walked through the office, he could feel the eyes of his team on him. Some looked at him with admiration, others with a hint of envy. Alex had learned to ignore both, focusing instead on the work that had become his passion and salvation. In the boardroom, Alex presented his vision for a revolutionary new software platform that could potentially transform the company's market position. As he spoke, he could see the excitement growing in the eyes of the board members. "And with this integrated approach, we're not just keeping up with the competition," Alex concluded, his voice strong and confident. "We're positioning ourselves to lead the industry for years to come." The room erupted in applause. The CEO, a normally stoic woman in her 50s, actually smiled. "Exceptional work, Mr. Thompson. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we're impressed. Get your team started on this immediately." As Alex left the boardroom, riding high on his success, his phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it, expecting another congratulatory message from a colleague. Instead, his blood ran cold. It was an email from a sender he never thought he'd hear from again. Email protected. With shaking hands, Alex opened the email. "Alex, I hope this email finds you well. Your father and I have been trying to locate you for some time. We've seen the news about your success at Nexus Innovations. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. We know it's been a long time, and we have a lot to discuss. Your sister Megan has confessed to fabricating the rumors that led to our terrible mistake years ago. We cannot express how deeply sorry we are for what happened. We'd like to meet with you, to apologize in person, and if possible, to be a part of your life again. We understand if you're not ready, but please know that we love you and miss you terribly. Love, Mom." Alex stared at the screen, a storm of emotions raging within him. Anger, hurt, confusion, and a tiny flicker of longing warred for dominance. After 8 years of silence, after throwing him out without a second thought, now they wanted to be a part of his life? He thought back to those first brutal months on the street. The hunger, the fear, the crushing loneliness. He remembered the countless nights he'd cried himself to sleep, wondering why his family had so easily believed the worst of him. But he also remembered Frank from the bookstore, who had seen worth in a broken, homeless teenager. He thought of his team at Nexus, who respected him for his skills and leadership, not knowing anything about his past struggles. Alex took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He had built this life from nothing, had clawed his way up from rock bottom through sheer determination and grit. Did he really want to open the door to the people who had cast him aside so callously? As he stood there, lost in thought, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from his realtor. "Great news, Mr. Thompson. The offer on the penthouse has been accepted. Congratulations on your new home." The juxtaposition was jarring. On one hand, the ghosts of his past reaching out, threatening to disrupt the life he'd built. On the other, a symbol of his hard-won success, a luxurious penthouse that the homeless teenager he once was could never have dreamed of. Alex closed his eyes, took another deep breath, and made a decision. He wouldn't respond to the email, not yet. He needed time to process, to think about what he wanted and what he was willing to risk. For now, he had a team to lead, a project to launch, and a new home to furnish. He had worked too hard, come too far, to let the shadows of his past dim the brightness of his future. As he walked back to his office, Alex straightened his shoulders, his resolve strengthening with each step. Whatever came next, whether he decided to confront his past or continue forging ahead, he would face it on his own terms. After all, that's how he had faced every challenge for the past 8 years, and he had no intention of changing that now. The sleek elevator ascended silently, carrying Alex to his new penthouse apartment. As the doors opened, he stepped into his private foyer, still marveling at the fact that this luxurious space was now his home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of San Francisco, the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Alex moved to the wet bar, pouring himself a glass of scotch, an indulgence he'd grown to appreciate. As he sipped the amber liquid, his mind wandered back to the email from his mother. 2 weeks had passed, and he still hadn't responded. The turmoil it had stirred within him refused to settle. A soft chime from his phone interrupted his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah, his assistant. "Mr. Thompson, just a reminder about tomorrow's charity gala. Car will pick you up at 7 p.m. The gala. Alex had almost forgotten. Nexus Innovations was a major sponsor of a local youth outreach program, something Alex had pushed for, given his own experiences. He made a mental note to review his speech one more time before bed. As he was about to set his phone down, it rang. An unknown number. Normally, Alex would let it go to voicemail, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello? Alex? Is that you?" The voice was familiar, yet distant, like a song heard long ago. Alex's grip tightened on the phone. "Dad?" "Yes, son, it's me." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. "Your mother emailed you a couple of weeks ago. We were hoping to hear back from you." Alex's mind raced. How had they gotten his number? Why now, after all this time? "I got the email," he replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I've been busy." Of course," his father said quickly. "We understand. We've seen the articles about your work at Nexus. You've done so well for yourself, son. We're proud of you." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. "Proud? After what they'd done?" "Proud?" Alex repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. "That's rich, coming from you." "Alex, please." His father's voice cracked slightly. "We know we made a terrible mistake. If we could take it back—" "Take it back," Alex interrupted, years of pent-up anger finally bursting forth. "You can't take back leaving your teenage son homeless. You can't take back believing the worst about me without even giving me a chance to explain. You can't take back 8 years of silence." There was a muffled sob on the other end of the line. His mother, Alex realized. She must be listening too. "We know," his father said, sounding defeated. "We know we can never make up for what we did. But Alex, we're your parents. We love you. We want to make amends, to be a part of your life again. Please, can we meet, talk face to face?" Alex closed his eyes, conflicting emotions warring within him. Part of him wanted to hang up, to cut this last tie to his painful past. But another part, a part he'd tried to bury deep inside, yearned for the family he'd lost. "The charity gala," he found himself saying. "Tomorrow night at the Fairmont. If you want to talk, you can find me there." Before his parents could respond, Alex ended the call. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone in his hand, wondering if he'd just made a huge mistake. The next evening, Alex stood at the entrance of the Fairmont's grand ballroom, greeting guests and donors. He was the picture of success in his tailored tuxedo, but inside he was a bundle of nerves. And then he saw them. His parents looked older, of course. His father's hair had gone completely gray, and there were new lines on his mother's face. They stood uncertainly at the edge of the crowd, looking both out of place and desperate to belong. As their eyes met Alex's, time seemed to stand still. In that moment, he was both the successful executive and the scared, abandoned teenager. The urge to run warred with the desire to embrace them. Taking a deep breath, Alex excused himself from the group he was talking to and walked towards his parents. As he approached, he could see the hope and fear battling in their eyes. "Alex," his mother breathed, reaching out a tentative hand. Alex stopped just out of reach. "You wanted to talk," he said, his voice low and controlled. "So talk." And there, in a quiet corner of a glittering ballroom, surrounded by the elite of San Francisco, the Thompson family began the long, painful process of confronting their past and determining if they had any hope for a future together. As Alex listened to his parents' tearful apologies and explanations, He realized that the true test of his strength wasn't in building his success, but in deciding what to do with it. Could he find it in himself to forgive? Or would the wounds of the past prove too deep to heal? The answer he knew would shape not just his relationship with his family, but the very person he would become. The charity gala buzzed around them, a stark contrast to the intense, intimate conversation unfolding in their secluded corner. Alex stood rigid, his face a mask of composure, as he listened to his parents' stumbling apologies and explanations. "We were wrong, so terribly wrong," his mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "We should have trusted you, should have listened." His father nodded, looking years older than Alex remembered. "When Megan finally told us the truth, we we were devastated. We'd ruined our family based on a lie, and we didn't know how to fix it." Alex's jaw clenched. "And it took you 8 years to try?" His parents exchanged a pained look. "We were ashamed," his father admitted. "We looked for you at first, but you disappeared. As the years went by, it got harder to imagine how we could ever make things right." "So what changed?" Alex asked, his tone sharp. His mother pulled out a tablet from her purse with shaking hands. "This," she said, turning it to show Alex a familiar webpage. It was a profile of him on Nexus Innovations' website, detailing his rise through the company ranks. "When we saw this," she continued, "saw how successful you become despite what we did, we knew we had to try to reach out, to tell you how sorry we are and how proud." Alex's eyes flicked from the tablet to his parents' faces. "Proud," he repeated, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. "You're proud now that I'm successful? Where was that pride when I was sleeping under bridges, scrounging for food in dumpsters?" His parents flinched as if he'd struck them. "Alex, please," his father pleaded. "We know we can never undo what we did, but we're here now, asking for a chance to make amends." For a moment, Alex said nothing, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The hurt child in him wanted to lash out, to make them feel a fraction of the pain he'd endured. But the man he'd become, the leader who inspired others and drove his company forward, knew that hanging on to that anger would only poison his future. "You say you want to make amends," Alex finally said, his voice low and controlled. "But do you even know what you're asking forgiveness for? It's not just for kicking me out. It's for every cold night, every hungry day. It's for the birthdays and holidays I spent alone, for the graduations you missed. It's for making me doubt my own worth, for forcing me to rebuild myself from nothing." Tears streamed down his mother's face, and his father looked as if each word was a physical blow. But Alex wasn't finished. "You're asking forgiveness for 8 years of silence. 8 years where you could have searched harder, could have reached out. 8 years where I had to learn to live without the concept of family." Alex paused, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "I've built a life for myself, a good life. I have people who respect me, who believe in me without question. Do you understand what you're asking when you want to be part of that life?" His parents nodded silently, seemingly at a loss for words. "I can't give you an answer tonight," Alex continued. "I need time to think, to decide if I'm ready to risk letting you back in." "We understand," his father said softly. "We'll wait, as long as it takes. Whatever you decide, we just want you to know how sorry we are and that we love you." Alex nodded stiffly, emotion threatening to break through his composed exterior. "I should get back to the gala. I have a speech to give." As he turned to leave, his mother called out, "Alex?" He paused, looking back at her. "We're so proud of the man you've become. Not because of your success, but because of your strength. You survived. You thrived, despite our failure. We hope someday you can forgive us. But even if you can't, please know that we love you, and we're in awe of who you are." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. Without responding, he nodded once and walked away, melding back into the crowd of the gala. As he took the stage to deliver his speech about the importance of supporting at-risk youth, Alex's eyes found his parents in the audience. They stood at the back, watching him with a mixture of pride and sorrow. In that moment, as he spoke about second chances and the power of resilience, Alex realized that the true test of his character lay not in his ability to succeed, but in his capacity to forgive. The decision he would make about his parents wouldn't just affect his relationship with them, it would define the kind of person he chose to be moving forward. As he finished his speech to enthusiastic applause, Alex knew that whatever he decided, it would be on his terms. He had built himself up from nothing once before. Now he had the strength to shape his future exactly as he saw fit, with or without the shadows of his past. Weeks passed after the charity gala, and Alex found himself grappling with the aftermath of his parents' reappearance in his life. The encounter had stirred up a maelstrom of emotions he thought he'd long since buried. As he threw himself into his work at Nexus Innovations, leading his team through the development of their groundbreaking new platform, the question of what to do about his family lingered in the back of his mind. One crisp Saturday morning, Alex found himself walking along the San Francisco Bay, the cool breeze off the water helping to clear his thoughts. He'd been coming here often lately, finding that the rhythmic sound of the waves helped him think. As he walked, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Frank, the bookstore owner who had given him his first job and set him on the path to where he was now. Alex, I hope this email finds you well. I saw the article about your latest achievement at Nexus. I always knew you were destined for great things, but you've exceeded even my highest expectations. I'm proud of you, son. I also wanted to let you know that I'm retiring and closing the bookstore. Before I do, I wondered if you might stop by. There's something I'd like to give you. All the best, Frank. Alex felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Frank had been more of a father to him than his own had ever been. Without hesitation, he changed direction, heading towards the old bookstore where his journey had truly begun. The bell above the door chimed as Alex entered, the familiar smell of old books enveloping him like a warm hug. Frank looked up from behind the counter, his face breaking into a wide smile. Alex, my boy, he exclaimed, coming around to embrace him. Look at you, all grown up and conquering the world. Alex returned the hug, surprised at how much he'd missed this place, this man who had believed in him when no one else did. It's good to see you, Frank, Alex said warmly. I can't believe you're closing up shop. Frank nodded, a touch of sadness in his eyes. It's time, but before I do, I have something for you. He disappeared into the back room, returning with a small wrapped package. I've been holding on to this for years, waiting for the right moment. Alex unwrapped it carefully, revealing a leather-bound first edition of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I remember you reading this over and over during your breaks, Frank said softly. A young man cast out into the world, making his own way against all odds. Seemed fitting. Alex ran his fingers over the embossed cover, speechless. This book had been his escape, his inspiration during those dark days. Frank, I can't accept this. It must be worth... Frank held up a hand, stopping him. It's not about the money, Alex. It's about what it represents. Your journey, your growth. You're living your own great expectations now. As Alex stood there, holding the book, something clicked into place. He realized that his success, his strength, wasn't just his own. It was built on the kindness of people like Frank, who had seen his potential and nurtured it. Thank you, Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything, Frank smiled, patting him on the shoulder. You did all the hard work, son. I just gave you a push in the right direction. As they talked, catching up on years of memories, Alex felt a sense of peace settle over him. By the time he left the bookstore, he knew what he needed to do. That evening, Alex sat in his penthouse, staring at his phone. Taking a deep breath, he dialed a number he'd memorized, but never used. Hello? His mother's voice was hesitant, hopeful. Mom, Alex said, his voice steady. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the past, about forgiveness, about family. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Oh, Alex, I can't forget what happened, he continued. But I think I'm ready to try and move forward. Not as if nothing happened, but with the understanding that we all have the capacity to change, to grow. He could hear his mother crying softly. We don't deserve your forgiveness, Alex, but we're so grateful for this chance. It won't be easy, Alex warned. We have a lot to work through, but if you're willing to try, so am I. As he ended the call, having made plans for a family dinner the following weekend, Alex felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He wasn't naive enough to think that everything would be perfect, but he was giving them, and himself, the opportunity for healing. Alex walked to his bookshelf, carefully placing the first edition of Great Expectations in a prominent spot. It would serve as a reminder of where he'd been, how far he'd come, and the people who had helped him along the way. As he looked out over the San Francisco skyline, Alex felt ready to write the next chapter of his life, one that included forgiveness, growth, and the family he had lost and found again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the strength and resilience he had built over the years, knowing that true success wasn't measured in wealth or titles, but in the capacity to overcome, to forgive, and to love. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled Alex's penthouse as he put the finishing touches on dinner. He'd spent the afternoon preparing a meal that was both a showcase of his newfound culinary skills and a nostalgic nod to family dinners from his childhood. The lasagna in the oven was his mother's recipe, one he'd recreated from memory and refined over the years. As he uncorked a bottle of wine, his hands trembled slightly. Tonight was the night, the first family dinner in over 8 years. The weight of anticipation and anxiety pressed on him, but he took a deep breath, centering himself. He was no longer that vulnerable teenager. He was a successful, self-made man who was choosing to open this door on his own terms. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through the spacious apartment. Alex straightened his shirt, took another steadying breath, and went to answer it. His parents stood there, looking as nervous as he felt. His mother clutched a bouquet of flowers, while his father held a gift-wrapped box. The silence stretched between them for a moment, before Alex stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Welcome," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Please, come in." As they entered, their eyes widened, taking in the luxurious surroundings. Alex saw a flicker of pride mixed with regret cross their faces. "Your home is beautiful, Alex," his mother said softly, handing him the flowers. "These are for you." "Thank you," Alex replied, accepting the bouquet. "Let me put these in water. Please, make yourselves comfortable." As Alex busied himself in the kitchen, he could hear his parents murmuring to each other in the living room. When he returned with the flowers in a vase and 3 glasses of wine, he found them standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city view. "It's breathtaking," his father commented, turning to face Alex. "You've done so well for yourself, son." Alex nodded, handing them each a glass of wine. "I've worked hard to get here." An uncomfortable silence fell as they all sipped their wine, the unspoken history hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Alex's mother spoke up. "Alex, we know that sorry isn't enough, but we want you to know how deeply we regret what happened, how proud we are of the man you've become, despite our terrible mistake." Alex's father nodded, his eyes glistening. "We failed you as parents. We let our own fears and prejudices cloud our judgment, and we lost the most precious thing in our lives, you." Alex listened, his face impassive. When they finished, he took a moment before responding. "I appreciate your apology, and I want you to know that I didn't invite you here tonight for more apologies or explanations. I invited you because I'm ready to try and build something new." He gestured for them to sit on the couch as he took a seat across from them. "I can't forget what happened, and I won't pretend that it didn't shape who I am, but I've realized that holding on to anger and resentment isn't the answer. It's not about forgetting or excusing. It's about choosing to move forward." His parents nodded, hope blooming in their eyes. "So," Alex continued, "I propose we start fresh. Not as the family we were, but as the people we are now. Adults who are choosing to be in each other's lives. Can we do that?" "Yes," his mother said eagerly, while his father nodded emphatically. "We'd like that very much, Alex." Just then, the oven timer beeped. Alex stood up, a small smile playing on his lips. "Perfect timing. Dinner's ready. I hope you're hungry. I made lasagna." His mother's eyes widened in recognition. "My recipe?" Alex nodded. "With a few tweaks of my own. Why don't you come help me serve?" As they moved to the kitchen, the tension began to ease. They fell into a rhythm, Alex directing his parents as they helped plate the food and set the table. It wasn't the same as the easy familiarity they once had, but it was a start. Over dinner, they began the delicate dance of getting to know each other again and again. Alex shared stories of his work at Nexus Innovations, carefully omitting the struggles of his early years. His parents spoke of their lives, of Megan's college graduation, and subsequent move to New York. As the evening wore on, Alex found himself relaxing. The conversation flowed more easily, punctuated by moments of laughter and shared memories. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, and moments when the weight of their history pressed in, but it was progress. As his parents prepared to leave, his father handed him the wrapped gift they'd brought. "We know it's years too late, but we wanted you to have this. Alex unwrapped it to find a framed family photo, one taken just weeks before everything fell apart. They all looked so happy, so unaware of what was to come. We kept it all these years, his mother explained, her voice thick with emotion, as a reminder of what we lost and what we hoped to regain someday. Alex stared at the photo, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Finally, he looked up at his parents. "Thank you," he said softly, "for this and for tonight. It's a start." As he closed the door behind them, Alex leaned against it, exhaling slowly. He looked around his penthouse, at the evidence of the life he'd built for himself, then back at the family photo in his hands. He walked over to his bookshelf and placed the frame next to the first edition of Great Expectations that Frank had given him. These two items, side by side, represented his past and his potential future, the family he'd lost and the one he might rebuild, the hardships he'd endured and the success he'd achieved. Alex knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more difficult conversations, more wounds to heal. But as he stood there, looking at the photo of his younger self, he felt a sense of peace. He had faced his past, confronted his pain, and chosen forgiveness, not for his parents, but for himself. Whatever the future held, Alex Thompson was ready to face it, successful, strong, and finally, truly free.